Ever feel like your phone's, you know, listening in on you? Like, how else would it know to hit me with ads for the exact thing I was just thinking about?
Haha, right. It's like they're reading our minds.
Seriously.
Yeah.
But it gets way deeper than targeted ads, especially when you start talking about AI and data privacy.
Absolutely. That's a whole other can of worms.
Totally.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack something called the right to be forgotten.
Yeah.
Basically, it's your right to tell companies, hey, delete my data. Sounds pretty straightforward in theory, right?
Being sick, yeah.
But you throw AI into the equation, and it gets complicated fast.
It really does throw a wrench in things. I mean, we're generating more data than ever these days, and AI, especially those large language models like what powers ChatGPT, they eat that stuff up.
It's like feeding a bottomless pit.
Hmm.
We're talking massive data sets, crammed with information, some of it's super personal, and it's all getting used to train these AI models.
Exactly. And it's not always clear what they're doing with it.
That's where our guide for this deep dive comes in. Data privacy expert Debbie Reynolds, a.k.a. the Data Diva. She's got a way with words, let me tell you.
Doesn't she? Always get straight to the point.
For sure. So she wrote this piece for the Data Privacy Advantage newsletter. And one of the things she hits on is how tough it is to actually delete data once it's been used to train an AI.
Yeah, it's not like hitting the delete key on your computer, is it?
Not at all. It's more like you teach a dog a new trick, right?
Mhm.
That trick's ingrained. You can't just tell the dog to forget it.
And these AI models, they learn fast.
So how do you make an AI forget?
Mm.
Especially when that AI might be powering like everything from the websites we browse to medical diagnoses.
It's a huge question with no easy answers, but Reynolds does outline some strategies companies are grappling with: abstinence, suppression, limitation, and recreation. Each has its own obstacles to think about.
Okay, abstinence when it comes to data. That sounds almost impossible in our world.
Right. Like, how do you even begin to avoid data in this day and age?
Seriously. But I guess conceptually it makes sense. You're essentially saying sensitive personal data is completely off limits for AI training.
It's like building a house. You wouldn't build it on a shaky foundation, would you?
Much better to start with a solid base.
Yeah.
But yeah, that takes some serious planning and careful data management, right? I mean, you're talking about going through mountains of information to pick out the non-sensitive stuff. It sounds like a massive undertaking, especially for companies that are practically swimming in data already. So what happens when avoiding data just isn't realistic? What are the other options?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. Reynolds talks about something called suppression. So imagine you've got an AI, maybe a chatbot, designed to help doctors access medical records, right?
Yeah, with you.
Suppression would be like training that chatbot to avoid revealing patient names, even if that information was part of its initial training data. Kind of like putting a filter on the AI's output.
So the AI might still have learned from that sensitive data, but it's been taught to hold back, not actually spit it back out. That makes sense. But how reliable is this kind of filtering? Can we really be sure the AI won't slip up?
That's the catch. It's not foolproof. It takes constant vigilance, updating those filters as new privacy concerns pop up. And, hackers are crafty. It's an ongoing game of cat and mouse.
So suppression is kind of like damage control. You're minimizing the risk, but not eliminating it entirely. What about limitation? How does that one work?
Limitation is all about setting boundaries. It's like telling the AI, okay, you can access this data, but only for these very specific purposes. Got it.
I see.
For example, an AI could use sensitive data to improve its understanding of language, but not to make predictions about an individual's behavior. Think of it like giving the AI a very specific set of keys. It can open certain doors, but not others.
It seems like limitation is trying to find that sweet spot, letting companies benefit from the power of AI without totally throwing user privacy under the bus. But Reynolds also talks about this last resort option, recreation. What's that all about? That sounds intense.
Recreation is exactly what it sounds like, retraining the entire AI model from scratch. This time, without the sensitive data. Imagine having to rebuild your house from the ground up because, oops, the foundation was faulty.
Yeah, that's a pretty big oops.
Exactly. It's a massive undertaking, time-consuming and crazy expensive.
Yeah, I can see why that would be the last resort. So we've got these four strategies: abstinence, suppression, limitation, and the nuclear option, recreation. And they each seem to come with their own sort of complexities. But, stepping back from the technical stuff for a second, I keep thinking about the whole trust issue. How can companies build trust with users when we're talking about something as complex and powerful as AI?
You've hit on a crucial point. Reynolds really emphasizes that this isn't just about checking boxes on a privacy policy. It's about transparency and accountability, giving users more control over their data. People need to feel confident that their information is being handled responsibly. I mean, it's one thing to tell a company your favorite color. It's another thing entirely when that company might be using your data to train an AI that's making decisions that impact your life.
Exactly. And we're not just talking about targeted advertising anymore. We're talking about AI potentially influencing things like loan applications, job interviews, even medical diagnoses.
It's huge.
It feels like we're on the verge of a massive societal shift. We're handing over more and more decision-making power to AI, but are we doing enough to ensure that this technology is being used ethically and responsibly?
That's the million-dollar question. And part of answering that question means grappling with the issue of bias in AI. I mean, think about it. If an AI is trained on biased data, it's going to learn those biases. And it could even end up amplifying them in ways we might not even anticipate.
It's like that old saying, garbage in, garbage out, but with much, much higher stakes.
Right, because we're not just talking about inaccurate data here. We're talking about the potential for AI to perpetuate harmful stereotypes and discrimination.
It's like we need to teach AI to unlearn some of the bad stuff it picks up from the data. But that brings us right back to that challenge. How do you make an AI forget something once it's, like, baked in?
It's one of the biggest puzzles in AI right now. And it's not just a tech problem, it's a philosophy problem, really. Like, what does it even mean for an AI to forget something? It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it.
Totally. It's a question with huge implications for, well, everything. But in the meantime, while we're all pondering the meaning of AI memory, Reynolds does mention something that could be a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to data privacy, something called federated learning. Have you heard about this?
Oh yeah, federated learning is super interesting. It's a whole different way of thinking about how AI learns. So instead of gathering all the data in one giant central location.
Right, like those massive data centers.
Exactly. Imagine sending the AI out to learn from the data where it lives, like on individual
Okay,
devices.
so instead of my phone sending data to some big server farm, the AI would come to my phone, learn what it needs from my data, and then just, like, peace out without ever actually taking my data off my device.
That's the idea. It's like having a personal tutor for your AI. It learns from you, your data, but never shares that info with anyone else.
Okay, that's pretty wild. No more giant data centers, no more worries about my info ending up in the wrong hands. But can that really work? Like, is that even feasible on a large scale?
It's definitely still early days for federated learning, but it has huge potential. It could be a total game changer for things like healthcare, right? Where privacy is absolutely essential. Or for creating personalized experiences without, compromising all your data.
So we've gone from trying to figure out how to make AI forget to, like, exploring this future where AI might not even need to collect and store our data in the first place. That's a pretty big shift.
Right. And I think that's what's so important about Debbie Reynolds' work. It reminds us that we're not just along for the ride with this technology. We get a say in how it develops and how it impacts our lives.
So true. It's on all of us to stay informed, ask the tough questions, and fight for an AI-powered future that puts privacy, fairness, and transparency front and center. So as you go about your day, think about all the ways AI is already woven into our lives, from the stuff you see online to the way you interact with your devices. And ask yourself, what role do I want my data to play in shaping this technology? That's something to chew on as we wrap up our deep dive for today.